Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for Ask the Expert North Texas. I'm Kristen Diaz.
I'm David Rankin. It's a story that went around the world when a cruise vacation went horribly wrong. 6 Americans, 2 Australian passengers are stranded off the coast of Africa. Their cruise ship left without them because they got back too late to the Norwegian Dawn. It all happened because they took a private shore excursion. How does this happen? Can this happen? On today's Ask the Expert, we're joined by Casey Carr from Sharon Carr Travel. He's in the KRLD Zoom room. Casey, thank you so much.
Hey, nice to be with you.
Does this happen often on cruises, or is this very rare?
It probably happens more often than you might expect, but I don't think it's common. There are different shore excursions in every port of call. The cruise lines will have their own comprehensive list. Those excursions tend to be more expensive than what you might be able to find with a third party, with a company like Viator, for example. The main difference being that the cruise line guarantees that they're going to get you back to the ship on time. And if they're running late, if one of their excursions is running late, they'll usually hold the ship for you so that your group gets back. And in rare cases, if they have to leave you, then they'll have to be responsible for getting you to the next port of call. They don't want to do that, so they'll just hold the ship for you for the most part. Whereas these other companies, because a company like Viator or there's plenty of other shore excursion providers out there, they'll offer you a guarantee. They'll give you a guarantee that they're going to get you back to the ship on time. But what they can't do is hold the ship for you. So if they're even a little bit late, then they have to pay to get you to the next destination. And hopefully these folks in Africa were booked with a company that has that kind of guarantee. Judging from the interviews that I've read, it doesn't necessarily seem like they are. I'm not sure who they booked with. And I don't know all of the details of this situation. Honestly, it doesn't seem to me like this is Norwegian's fault. I read a little bit of an interview with one of these folks, and they got back to the tender area, and they were putting down a tender and taking guests to shore, which means the ship was sort of anchored offshore. And they could still see the ship there, and they were upset that the ship left without them. They felt like they could have just put another tender down and come back for them. And again, I don't know all the details of the situation, but I do know that it's probably not that simple. You know, that there are port fees, there's different liabilities and things like that that they have to consider. You know, policy is policy for a reason. And these folks made it to the tender station after the last one had departed. And so that's that. They're stuck there, and they have to make their way to the next port of call to try and catch up with the ship.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think there are a lot of details missing out of this story for anyone to really have a full conclusion of what exactly went wrong besides just getting there late. But the other question is, we're still in the peak of spring break between, grade school and colleges. And then, of course, everyone's looking toward the summer, which will be here before you know it. And we're seeing already record-breaking numbers for cruise lines this year. They're expecting to have a great year. So how do we avoid this? Obviously, be on time. But if there is, any kind of tips that you would give travelers, like, we don't know in this case, was there a U.S. embassy for them to go to that they could, talk to if they got stranded? Did they have their passport or their IDs on them? Should they have those things when they get off the ship? Those types of things. What do you recommend?
I don't think it's necessary to always bring your passport with you when you get off the ship, although that did cause a problem for a lot of these travelers because they didn't have their passport with them. A lot of them didn't have their credit cards and things like that with them. I do recommend bringing some cash and bringing your credit cards and things like that with you that you might need. I also, I gleaned from one of these interviews that they were nervous getting towards the end of their shore excursion and mentioning to their guide that, aren't we running a little late? Aren't we cutting it a little bit close? And they got reassurances from their guide. I don't blame the people because, you listen to those reassurances from your guide. But when it's a situation where you're going to actually miss your ship, I think you can pay attention to your intuition there and be a little more stern with the guide and say, hey, we are pushing it too close. We don't want to be back 5 minutes before the tender is supposed to depart. We need to be back with plenty of time to get on board. So taking some initiative there and taking some steps to ensure that you are getting back to the ship and don't just take the guide's word for it. I think that's important. It's always good to know where the U.S. embassies are and places like that. It's also very important to have emergency numbers on hand, like Norwegian's emergency number. And to Norwegian's credit, I know that they've been helping these guests all along. They've been in close contact with them. And they're even reimbursing some of their expenses that they've had trying to catch up with the ship. I know they went to one port of call and it ended up being too windy, and the ship couldn't put down tenders there, and so they had to go even further to another port of call, to Senegal, I think, is where they were finally picked up by the ship, and Norwegian reimbursed them for some of those costs. So phone numbers, money are very important. Again, I don't think it's always necessary to have your passport with you wherever you go. You like to keep those things secure. But if it's only a little bit more expensive to use the cruise line's shore excursion, I think it's a good idea to do that so that you have that guarantee.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of personal responsibility involved in this as well. We don't know what the Norwegian Dawn had available for these people on this particular stop, where we have no idea how much cheaper it was or more expensive it was. And talk to us about the whole concept of the personal responsibility that you might have to find your own way to the next port if you miss the departure of your ship.
Yes, and we've seen it over the years. I mentioned it's not something that's common, but I've seen it many times over the years. And most people kind of roll with it and take things in stride, take a little bit of personal responsibility for it, because and typically it's a situation where you have misjudged the time, or maybe you were remembering the all aboard time from the previous port, and then you get there and the ship's already left, and so it's doable, and there are services on the ground that can help you manage those things. Usually the cruise line will have a team on the ground that's been sort of managing their ground operations that can assist you, and at least in getting a hotel and things like that. But largely it's going to be your responsibility to rebook flights and things like that. If the cruise line can assist you with that, they will. If you have a travel agent, even better, you can call them and get assistance with managing that whole process. But if you'll just pay attention to the times, the return times, and be strict with your guide about that. You can even make up a story. I was left behind once before. I don't want to cut it close this time. Let's please just be sure we're back with plenty of time to get back on the ship.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we talk about the guides, and this is really your expertise. Casey, you have been able to corral cats, I'm sure. In many instances, when you're out with large groups and you're traveling. We are so fortunate here at KRLD that we have an amazing trip coming up for our listeners to sign up for. It is to cruise out to Alaska. And of course, we would never want anything like this to ever happen. But this is just, again, a heightened awareness that, we want everybody to have a safe and great time. How do you ensure that when you're taking out large groups?
How do we ensure that people are getting back to the ship on time, or that?
Yeah, absolutely, and that everyone stays safe when you're on group travel.
Well, we take a lot of steps to keep people informed. I think that's the most important thing that we can do. It also covers us. People are free to do what they want. Sometimes people make mistakes. Sometimes people push it a little close. As long as we're communicating, hey, this is a firm departure time. The ship will set sail at 3 p.m. If you're not back for the last tender, they will leave you behind. As long as we are communicating that, then the responsibility is entirely on the guests. And if something goes wrong and we're there, of course, we'll get involved as much as we can to assist the guests. But really, the responsibility lies with the individual traveler to make sure that they're back there in time. But it's good with our groups that we have the support structure there.
Yeah, very true. And as Kristen brought up, coming up later this summer, your chance to go to Alaska. And this is one of my favorite trips on one of my favorite cruise ships. This is one of those bucket list trips that we talk about with the KRLD World Tour. And as someone once said, it's where God went to show off, and you get to see everything that Alaska has to offer in the summer. While it's 100 degrees here, it might be 70 degrees in Alaska.
Oh, that sounds dreamy, doesn't it? Hey, leave me in Alaska, okay? I'll come back late for my excursion and get stranded in Ketchikan for a week. There's worse places to be stranded. But yeah, David, you and I have been talking about Alaska for years. We've both been several times. Chris, and I know you haven't been yet. It's such a magical. It's hard to describe. It's the final frontier of America, and it's so big and just a massive experience. And you're surrounded by wildlife and just the most glorious scenery that you've ever seen in your life. And cruising is a great way to do it. There's so much in Alaska to see that's along the coastline, the glaciers and the fjords and so much marine wildlife. The coastlines are specked with bald eagles everywhere you look. You'll just see the whiteheads up in the trees. And it's a great way to get around Alaska. The places like Juneau that are on our itinerary, which is the capital of Alaska, you can only reach Juneau by ship or by plane. So there's some of these places that you can only see by cruise ship. And it's just a really special experience. We've been doing it, I think, every year for about 30 years now. We've had our groups going to Alaska, and we're so excited to take this group on the KRLD World Tour. Only a couple of months, David, after you'll be in Tuscany with the previous group on the KRLD World Tour. And I think Alaska is a worthy follow-up to Tuscany.
Absolutely. We've got, and that actually sold out going out to Italy. We've got some spots still available to go to Alaska. Talk to us about how simple it is to sign up for this trip and the great deal that they're going to be able to get, just being able to work with Sharon Carr Travel. Yes,
of course. And so, well, let's start with our introductory price, which is $15.99, which includes the flights. That's an insane price. That's for an interior cabin. A lot of our clients will travel in interior cabins. I love the balcony. I'd love to be able to step outside. I think in Alaska, it's especially great to have a balcony because there's so much scenery passing you by and just so many wonderful things to spot outside. And the captain might come over the airwaves and say, "Oh, there's a whale off the starboard side," and you can just pop out on your balcony and see it. Having the experience, even in the interior stateroom, of this whole beautiful ship to go out and explore and the viewing areas and the onboard programs that they have. They'll have guest lecturers on board that are teaching you about Alaska and the incredible history of Alaska, and all of the different peoples that settled Alaska. Of course, the Russians and there's so much history and lore to learn about. And the cruise line does a great job of teaching you about those things while you're actually on the trip. And it's a no-brainer at that price, $15.99. You don't even have to figure out the flights to get to Seattle, which are typically around $500. In the summertime, even higher. Kristen, I know you just went to Seattle. You experienced that.
I did. I did, and I was like, "Ouch!" To know that this is going to be included, and I'm getting so much more just with the cruise. That's not even like to start with the trip. I mean, that's incredible.
Yeah, and there's there are other amenities that we've included on top of that. You've got different options. You can do free Wi-Fi. You can do the beverage package. You can do the specialty dining package. You can get a $50 shore excursion credit per person, and that's you can choose two of those things if you're in the interior or the ocean view. Everything for a balcony and above gets all of those things included. So you've got your free Wi-Fi, you have beverages, meaning your alcoholic beverages, all of that stuff is included, making this basically an all-inclusive cruise. And the balcony stateroom is only $24.99, so it's less than $1,000 more than the interior stateroom, and again, including flights. So all you got to do is show up at the airport. Norwegian's going to pick you up at the airport in Seattle and take you to the ship and then take you back at the end of the cruise. It's a very easy experience. And you'll be traveling with our wonderful KRLD listeners also.
That's
and
right.
that's half the fun, is being able to run into various people that you are on the tour with, and sharing the love Texas and bringing it to Alaska. How to get in touch with you to find out about the Alaska trip?
Well, you can call our 800 number, and we're all standing by here to take reservations. Yvette here in our office is our coordinator. So you might end up talking to her. You might end up talking to me. You can call us at 800-648-4856. You can also go online at SharonCarTravel.com to our signature packages page. And you can find the trip details there. I know it's up at the World Tour link at KRLD.com also. But give us a call. It's best to let us answer your questions live on the phone, and we can fill you in on all the details. It's 800-648-4856.
Absolutely love it. Looking forward to that. Thanks so much, Casey.
Thanks so much, you guys. Great to be with you.
Casey Carr from Sharon Carr Travel on today's Ask the Expert.